Greetings, programs. Today is episode 3, which would have been 4. What is non-duality? Don't Google it! No, really. The concept comes from an Eastern tradition, Hindu or Buddhist, depending on which book you read first, and has either been co-opted by woo-woo merchants or uses the language of woo-woo due to a lack of adequate Western vocabulary to describe the experiences contained therein. So what is it? Well, the basic concept is fairly simple and is backed up by science. The concept is you are your body. No, there is not a magical spirit or a soul someplace else being aware of things, just the brain and the things that it does. This means that there is no you separate from your experiences. This would be footnote 1, which contains a link to the Wikipedia entry which explains it in a little bit more detail. What I'm going to be doing is giving you my interpretation of that and trying to explain some of my experiences with it, though it would take a long time to do all of it, so I'll just be covering the basics today. So why all the drama, and what's leading to all the bizarre stuff that I saw when I googled it? Why, thank you for asking, imaginary interviewer. Are you waiting for me to start using the word quantum yet? Well, the basic concept is the self, the part of you in your mind that says I when a person says I exist. That part is an illusion. Ah, now we've hit the woo-woo, surely, says the imaginary questioner. Well, no. If you've been paying attention to consciousness research, which is a big thing if you're interested in AI, or Sam Harris, or just cool stuff from neuroscience, which you'll see on YouTube, you'll discover that some of the ideas that were previously relegated to the realm of crazy Eastern philosophy actually turned out to have something to them. Free will turns out to be an illusion, and this idea is slowly spreading. See footnote number 2 for a short version on free will, and see footnote number 3 for a long version on free will, both by Sam Harris. Wait, what? How is any of that real? I shall go over this first, this free will business, as this is how I came to these ideas. It's also simpler to show, and it helps to explain the next steps. So basically, you do not have libertarian free will. What is that? See footnote number 4, which is a Wikipedia article explaining the idea of libertarian free will. In short, to summarize, the ability to have chosen differently. For example, if, hypothetically, the universe was somehow rewound atom by atom somehow, could you have chosen differently? And the answer is basically no. No, you couldn't have. See footnote number 5, which is a video explaining in great detail the whole concept of free will by Anti-Citizen X, who is absolutely brilliant at explaining this sort of thing, and I highly recommend you read or watch everything he says and does. It's awesome. Now, to explain in a little bit more detail from my point of view about the free will. We have thoughts, and we all know that, and that's not really up for debate. Our thoughts help to direct our actions, and this is something that we all know. But we don't choose our thoughts. You don't choose the desires that drive your actions or that led to those thoughts. They just appear in consciousness, out of nowhere, as it were. And in terms of our behavior, you didn't choose really to be the person that you are. For example, you did not choose not to be a psychopath. You were just a person who was born with a non-psychopathic person's brain. But you feel as though you have free will. You feel as if at any moment you could choose to ignore what anybody is saying and lift your hand and say, see, I chose to do that. But did you really choose to do that? If you did choose to do that, did you truly choose to do that? Or were you prompted to do so by a desire to demonstrate your free will? Where did that desire come from? Could you have chosen not to have that desire? And we all know that we are not totally in control of our own thoughts. How many of us have been driven to do things that we know we should not do, or that we know will make us unhappy later? How often, for example, have we had an extra slice of cake when we know we shouldn't, when we know we're going to feel bad later for falling off of our diet plan? And the cake eating only lasts for seconds or minutes. We all recognize that we're not completely in control of ourselves. But it's worse than that. We're not in control of ourselves at all. The mind just does what it will as a function of the brain, and the consciousness is just along for the ride. It is perhaps simply a recording function. Research on this is ongoing. Now, we think that we're in control because Well, who else is there? It must be me raising my hand, right? I mean, who else is doing it? There's no one here but me. Well, in actual fact, the subconscious parts of your mind, the parts of your mind that you don't control, that's what's doing it, in response to drives and urges that you also don't know. I mention all this as this is where I came in. Having already absorbed this from Sam and made a reasonable stab at understanding it, it made the next step, the part which actually is non-duality, a whole lot easier. So what is the next step? What is the first thing that actually is non-duality? Well, having acknowledged that one thing that we assumed we always had turned out to be an illusion, see Sam's excellent videos and Anti-Citizen X's excellent videos, is there anything else that we can assume that we always had, but is also an illusion? And as it happens, the answer is yes. The self turns out to be one. So what does that even mean? Well, that like with free will, the idea of self is an illusion. We think it's there, but it isn't. What does that actually mean? Well, first we need to talk about some things that are so obvious and so foundational that they're almost never even examined. For example, what is the self? I mean, we all think we know what the self is. Of course, we are ourselves. Us. What a silly thing to say. But what actually is that? Now, I'm not talking about the body. A person can change their body in many ways, or even lose part of it in some horrible accident, and still be essentially themselves. We might not be happy about losing a part of ourselves, but our self is not the part that we lost. If it was, we wouldn't be here complaining about it. And if we were in some terrible, hypothetical science fiction accident and reduced to a brain in a life support vat, would we still exist as ourselves? Sure, our life would be different, but we would still exist. We could still think our thoughts and maybe see and hear things if we had the capability. So see, clearly, the thing that is us is not our body. So, also obviously, that which is us is clearly our brain, or something contained within it. So now we have to look in our own mind. So let's do a mental inventory. What is there in there? Well, we have thoughts, sure, and we sense things. We see and we hear and we feel things. We have memories. Is there anything else in there? No, I'm serious. Have a look. Just sit down for a second and have a bit of a think. You'll feel things and see things and hear things. Those are sensations. Great. And you'll know you have memories if you just stop and try and remember something. And you'll have thoughts. But what else is actually in your head besides those three things? Have a look. See if you can find something else. I'll submit that after you've looked for a little bit, you won't actually find anything else in there. So, if there isn't anything else, which of these three parts has that which is us in it? Well, let's have a check. Let's knock them down one by one. Where do thoughts come from? Well, we don't know, do we? And we've all had thoughts that make no sense, or even that we wish didn't happen. Intrusive thoughts, or bad thoughts, or thoughts that make us think, gosh, where did that come from? And we are witnessing the thoughts, aren't we? Because otherwise how would we be aware of them? So clearly the thoughts are not us, otherwise we wouldn't be separate enough for us to even be aware of them as thoughts. The thoughts themselves do not contain the reality of what it is that they are being thought about. For example, if you think about Santa, it doesn't magically make Santa real. So thoughts about ourselves, by the same token, don't also make us real. So is the thing that makes up the us the thoughts that we are having, or is it something else? If somebody has the same thoughts as us, are they then us? I'd suggest not. So we need to keep looking somewhere else other than thoughts. Now we have memories. Are our memories us? Well, if we lose our memories, I definitely say it would change us for sure. But would we still exist? Plenty of people have suffered from amnesia, and this has affected them for sure. But they can still think, still be people, and still self-identify as me, even if they've forgotten the name that they used to have. And I'm sure you've had memories that turned out to be misremembered, and it didn't change who you were, did it? So while memories can affect us and are important, we are clearly not just our memories. So what's next? Well, senses. We have senses and we can sense things with them. We can see and we can hear. But if we close our eyes, we are still us, aren't we? If we stick earplugs in and can no longer hear anything, we are still us. We can sit here and think, and we have just mysteriously vanished. So where are we? But there's nothing else in our head, is there? Thoughts, memories, sensations. And we've gone through those one at a time, and we haven't found where us might be, where the we are is in all of that mess. And there isn't anything else in there. So where is the self? Where is we, I, us? And so what is the self? Well, as far as I can tell, the self seems to be an illusion maintained by constant sensory input. You are seeing and hearing and feeling things, right? You're hearing this now. You're looking at the screen perhaps, or feeling your bum on a chair. So you must be real, right? And this is why sometimes people who dump themselves into a sensory deprivation tank experience something called the death of self. Their sense of self that we all have every day while we're just living our lives, that can disappear, hence the term death of self. And it can disappear because there's no constant feedback to reinforce the illusion that we as a self exists. And so therefore it can break down. And this is just one of the reasons that people find things like sensory deprivation tanks to be so scary. Also, being a dark tank full of water probably doesn't help. This is why, if you look up non-duality on the internet and wade through the woo-woo speak, you will find comments like, there is no self, there is only seeing, and such like stuff. What they're trying to get across is that there's no inner nugget of you hiding in your mind, looking out of your eyes and hearing with your ears. There's no metaphorical real you hiding inside your head, watching the movies of what it is that your eyes see. The act of seeing is interpreted by the conscious mind as evidence of the existence of an inner self. You see. Therefore, there must be someone to see what you just saw. Therefore, you exist. Whereas in reality, all that is happening is that input is coming in, and some part of your mind notes that, and also takes it in as the feeling of existing. I did this partly to get it straight in my head, and hopefully to counter some of the woo-laden explanations out there as to what is non-duality. Phrases like, what is the sound of one hand clapping, sounds cute, but if you're not in the right frame of mind, it's just completely meaningless. Once you've sort of taken on board some of this philosophy and actually understand what they're driving at, it does actually make a degree of sense. But until then, it's just some random deepity sounding thing. Me, I look at non-duality as an extreme form of mindfulness and skepticism. The skepticism being extended even to examining things that we assume we all have, like free will and an inner self. And the reason this all seems so real, so grounded, so utterly impossible to not exist, is that it's been with you since before you were even conscious of yourself existing as a person. It was built up from basically the time you were born onwards. And so to quote Sam Harris, who is the person who started me investigating all this stuff, you're not controlling the storm. You're not lost in it. You are the storm. Thanks, and come back next week for our next episode, which will be episode 4, Sense of Awe as an Atheist, which was going to be today's episode, but I had to do a lot of thinking anyway, and so these two things kind of came together. So I sort of rearranged things. Bye for now.